Trauma Therapist Podcast, episode 395. Welcome to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. My name is Guy McPherson. My mission is to raise the awareness of trauma and to help support and inspire new trauma workers through this podcast and my membership community, Trauma Therapist 2.0. Thanks so much for joining me today, and here we go. All right, guys, I just want to say that I am thrilled to have this podcast sponsored by cptsdfoundation.org. A little while ago, I actually got to meet the founder, Athena Moberg of CPTSD Foundation. We met here in San Francisco, sat down, had breakfast, and it was amazing. I got to feel and see her passion, the passion that she has for this work, and not just for therapists and clinicians, but survivors as well. CPTSD Foundation provides peer-led support and adjunctive care in between therapy sessions for survivors of complex trauma. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, survivors can come together to give and receive support and validation and feel equipped with the knowledge and skills they can use every day. You can check it out at cptsdfoundation.org. Their website is amazing. They have daily recovery support. They have free support groups. They have a healing book club. And Trauma Therapist podcast listeners can get 50% off the first month when they join the daily recovery support calls. You can check that out by going to cptsdfoundation.org/trauma therapist podcast. Once again, that's cptsdfoundation.org/trauma therapist podcast. Or just head on over to the website at traumatherapistpodcast.com and click on the link there, and you'll be in business. Trauma may be a fact of life, but it doesn't have to be a life sentence. Somatic experiencing is a psychobiological method of addressing clients' physical and emotional trauma conditions and helps to give voice to their experiences without a need for them to retell their story. SE is a complementary modality that focuses on regulation of the nervous system and offers the opportunity to engage, complete, and resolve the body's instinctual responses to traumatic experiences. For more information regarding somatic experiencing and the SE professional training program, please visit www.traumahealing.org. That's www.traumahealing.org. All right, guys, welcome back to the Trauma Therapist Podcast. Very excited to have as my guest today, Dr. Daniel Roberts. Dr. Daniel, welcome.
Thank you. It's good to be here.
All right. So Dr. Daniel Roberts, who holds a doctorate of management in organizational leadership, is an author and consultant who conducts world-class women-centered education, research, and advocacy in spiritual leadership and spiritual support. Daniel has over 15 years of experience in providing emotional and spiritual support to men and women in the armed forces. He also provides training and mentorship to thousands of military chaplains through conferences, classroom instruction, and one-on-one coaching. His students include chaplains from the U.S. Army, Air Force, and Canadian Armed Forces. Daniel also helped the CAF develop military doctrine for the deployment of chaplains as religious advisors. All right, Daniel, obviously just a little bit about you. Share with our listeners, though, where you're calling from and where you're from originally, and then we'll get going.
Okay. I'm calling from North Carolina, and I've been stationed here in North Carolina for many years. I'm originally from Colorado, though.
Okay.
Grand Junction, Colorado.
Awesome. All right. So you said you had a quote. We oftentimes begin by sharing a quote. What do you have for us?
Mine is really simple, kind of cliche, but the old "keep calm and carry on" slogan. When I was stationed at Fort Dix years ago, it was a particularly dark period of my life, I would say, or there were some dark periods in my life then. I was away from my family. My family was in North Carolina. My wife was helping her dad through the last few months of his life. And my own father was experiencing some suicidal episodes. So I was under a lot of stress there. I was pursuing a PhD, and I was very busy as a full-time soldier in the Army. So, keeping that mantra in front of me just helped me kind of stay calm, persist, and just work through each day by day, and solve the problems as they came. Okay. So that was it.
All right. So you talked a little bit about that quote, but why that quote? I guess unpack that a little for us.
So as I was experiencing all these things, going through these things, trying to, stay positive each day, I found that I tended, especially at night, to panic, especially when I would lay down at night. You stay busy all through the day, but then when you get in your bedroom quiet at night, there's no one else in the room but you. And then all the thoughts about what is going to happen tomorrow. What about this? What about that? What should I do here? And so just thumbing through my phone and finding that as a meme, and say, you know what? That's what I need to do. Right. And then, you research the history of it a little bit and find that dates back to World War II. And that was for the British people to keep calm and carry on, even though they were being bombarded and stuff by Germany during the Battle of Britain. So that just sort of stuck with me as something to kind of tell myself, a mantra to say, hey, just keep calm, carry on. Things will get better. You include prayer and meditation in those things, but it's just some things to say to yourself to kind of keep going.
Right.
When things are rough.
Yeah. I mean, even too, as you said, it maybe is cliche, but it is so, I think, poignant and easier said than done. I mean, it takes a lot of work and self-awareness. So let's use that, Daniel, to as a kind of a foundation and to move forward. I'm really excited to hear about your story and how you got into this. So were you yourself in the service?
Yeah, actually, okay. Yep. And I have been for many years. So.
Okay. All right. So yeah, let's tell us about how you got into this field and tell us that story.
Okay. So I first joined the Army back in 1989, and I spent a few years in combat arms. And then around the year 2000, I got out. I started pursuing a ministerial degree at John Wesley College. And then the tragedies of 9/11 happened. And so I then joined the Army Reserve to be a chaplain assistant. And later on, I was stationed at Fort Dix, New Jersey. And so during that period, working in the chaplain field and talking to some female soldiers about their deployment experiences, they had some really traumatic experiences. Some of them, one of them had been raped by a fellow soldier. Another one had seen some real atrocities, and they were really struggling. And they felt like the chaplain support they received was really weak. And so that lit a fire, I guess you would say, to begin to pursue research, education, and training on how we can make the chaplaincy better for women soldiers, for those who are suffering from things they experience overseas. And women experience the military somewhat different than men in some ways. They have their trauma is often different. But sometimes in the chaplaincy, we sort of tend to categorize everybody the same or pursue the same approaches. So their stories gave me passion and desire to really become an expert in that field so that I could help them and help others like them.
I want to go back because you casually kind of passed by a major decision, which was once you got out of the service, you decided to pursue a degree and pursuit in chaplaincy. What was behind that decision?
Yeah, so after many years in the Army, and I just wanted to do something different. I was gone from my family so much that I wanted an opportunity to have a life that was more family oriented. But I loved the military. I loved soldiers. I loved that. So, but I realized that I grew up as a Christian, and I'd kind of gotten away from my faith. And so I just began to think about, as you spend many years in the military, you do some difficult things, and you start thinking, and you face death often in many ways. You start thinking about the deeper meanings of life, eternity, those type of things. And that sort of encouraged me to get back to my Christian roots, begin some serious Bible study. And I wanted to help people. And growing up with that foundation, being in the church and so on and so forth, it was natural for me to pursue that as a route, versus medicine or psychology or something else.
Right. Yeah. Thanks for that. I mean, on one hand, it seems to me, it can seem to me that, they're almost kind of polar opposites in a sense, war and spirituality or
Right.
chaplaincy. And maybe we can even, define what chaplaincy is, but they're not. Obviously, they're not. They're so interrelated. I mean, just as an aside here, I did my dissertation on existential meaning making in Iraq combat vets who had PTSD, and it was a qualitative study, which means I did a lot of interviewing of veterans, right, both male and female, and maybe surprising to some, but probably not surprising to you, a lot of what was shared by my interviewees was this profound loss of trust and faith in God, right, and however, right, they defined it. But right, little digression there. But so so what's your response to what I just said in terms of they're almost antithetical, but not? Yeah. What would you say?
Right. Well, it's very interesting because some veterans, their faith deepens when they experience combat. Some they lose their faith or whatever, and a lot of it has to do with how you're brought up, but also how you think about God. So if I think about God as somebody who's supposed to take care of me, provide for me, and make a way for me, or if in your upbringing, or you had never considered what about trauma? What does it mean when people experience trauma? Then sometimes those folks go, well, what kind of God would
right ...
whatever. And so other folks go, somehow their faith deepens in all this because they start with the premise that the end will work out, that there's a plan for all this. There must be a reason for all this. So a lot of it just has to do with how you think about God and how you were brought up thinking about God. But what's interesting about the military, it definitely causes you to think about what you have thought about God in the past and what you will think about him going forward, because most of us in our childhood experience don't experience the same kind of trauma you do in the military. And so when you encounter that trauma, or even very, very, very intense training, which is not necessarily trauma, then it causes you to revisit ideas about God you've had in the past, and maybe you didn't think about him too much, and now you definitely will, one way or the other. And so that's what's interesting about the military and how religion plays into that. And it doesn't really matter. It doesn't have to be Christianity. It could be Buddhism, Islam, or any Judaism. You're still going to have to, you're still going to be challenged by your own previous thoughts about God. Mm-hmm. One way or the other. No question about it.
Yeah, this is really interesting. I mean, I feel we could do a whole podcast episode on this particular topic, but I kind of want to too. But let's kind of get over to this other side. To that. Yeah, awesome. Okay, well, let's talk about this. First of all, if you can define what chaplaincy is, and then start talking about your interest and the work with women. in their
Okay.
experience?
Military chaplaincy in particular, I'll work with that, is its own. Well, that's a good question. What is chaplaincy? It's very broad. Of course, chaplaincy is a field, and I think within the military context, one of the important things we need to keep in mind about what chaplaincy is it's first and foremost there to protect the First Amendment rights and take care of the First Amendment rights of every service member, and that's the freedom of religion. So chaplains are there to make sure that the soldiers' freedom of religions are safeguarded. They advise commanders on issues related to religion and spirituality, morality, and so on. And so, as soldiers make various requests to, sometimes the mission and their religion or their religious practices can be in a little bit of a conflict. Maybe certain times they want to observe, certain things they want to observe. And so chaplains are there to advise commanders on how to make sure soldiers are taken care of in those ways. But it's also about providing pastoral support and religious services to those soldiers who want them. It could be praying with soldiers, counseling with soldiers, helping them solve problems. But a chaplain is somebody who is a confidential person that somebody can go to, and whatever's said between them is protected, just like as with a lawyer or doctor. So
Okay.
Those are the many facets of chaplaincy in the military.
Now, do chaplains come from any type of religious or spiritual orientation? Does it matter?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question. To be a military chaplain, there are certain educational requirements, and you have to be endorsed by a religious organization that's recognized by the Armed Forces Chaplaincy Board. But it can be, we have hundreds of organizations that are recognized. We have Buddhist chaplains, Jewish chaplains, Christian chaplains, Catholic chaplains, you name it. Now, virtually most any religion where somebody can get a seminary degree or something equivalent to a seminary degree, be endorsed by a recognized religious body as having that degree, and being a person of character, so on and so forth. And then, of course, they have to meet health requirements and the things that most people have to do to get in the military. But it's not so much the religion as much as the endorsing body. So we do recognize all faiths, but we don't always have chaplains from every single faith out there, and that has to do with whether that particular religion has an educational institution that someone could go to and be endorsed, so on and so forth. Did that answer your question? Or
Yeah, it did. I appreciate it. So yeah, your interest and pursuit, working with women and their experience in the military and so forth. Let's kind of look at that.
Okay. Yeah. So again, I felt like women service members were a little bit underserved when it came to the chaplaincy. And it wasn't intentional. I don't think male chaplains, first of all, the military chaplain is mostly male. The Army itself is about 95% male. And I'm not sure what the Air Force and Navy percentages are, but it's mostly male. And that's not because we don't allow women. That's mostly because not all religions endorse women for pastoral roles and so on. But it's a heavily male institution, and chaplains are well-meaning folks. But I felt like that women were a little bit underserved, because as I had these conversations with women, they told me stories about seeking support from a chaplain who they felt, well, he didn't really understand, he didn't seem to care, he wasn't empathetic. Now, I think those chaplains cared. Maybe they just weren't trained well enough or experienced enough or so on and so forth to provide the support those women needed. So I focus on bridging that gap between women and the pastoral support they need, and I do that through research, training, practice, so on.
That's really interesting, and it's just interesting to hear your kind of explication about the women's interpretation. They felt that person didn't care, and just as you said, it might have been that they weren't trained enough, they didn't have any experience enough. But it's interesting, that's the perception that they got, that this person didn't care, and I'm sure that wasn't the case across the board.
Sure.
But so what let's get more specific here. Let's talk about your research. What are you finding? Because I think this is really fascinating that obviously here you are, a male in the service, working in this field of chaplaincy, working with women. Let's get into it here. What are you researching specifically?
Right now, the project we're working on is a moral injury project, and it is also qualitative. It's a grounded theory project. And so we're conducting in-depth interviews with women, and we're asking them about their experiences with moral injury. We're asking them about how they define it, so on and so forth. And so previous moral injury has been largely centered around the experiences of male combat veterans. That's not completely true, but that's been an emphasis of it. So we looked at what we wanted to do, and when I say we, I'm talking about my friend, mentor, fellow researcher Joanne Kovacic, and I want to mention her because she is really a great researcher and has helped me grow a lot in that area as a researcher. But yeah, so we're interviewing them and asking them about their experiences to see, is moral injury different for women than men? And why is that so? And what does that look like? Because moral injury is still a lot of research to be done on that. It's a pretty hot field, but we wanted to look at the women's veteran side of things. And I think one of the things we found is that military sexual trauma is a common experience. It doesn't happen to all of them, but that's a very common experience with women veterans. We also find that women, what I think is very interesting, women define it differently generationally. So one woman who was the Vietnam era, basically, said that, yes, she was sexually assaulted, but she said, I didn't see it as moral injury. I just said, hey, this is the good old boys club, and this is what's happened when you're in the good old boys club. And I was floored by that. And I asked her, I said, but that's not moral injury? She said, well, it's morally wrong, but I wouldn't consider it moral injury. It's just what happened back then.
Dan, let me just interrupt here. So I know you said that there were different definitions of moral injury, but can you define what that is for our listeners?
Okay, so moral injury is the inner conflict someone feels when they experience something or take part in something or witness something that is in conflict with their moral values. So in a military context, that tends to be things like killing somebody in combat. For some of these women, it was being raped or assaulted. For another woman, it was just simply seeing the poverty and violence overseas and being powerless to do something about it. She saw all the things in that environment, and she was really troubled because she couldn't really do anything about it. It wasn't her job. It wasn't her role. So moral injury it's more than seeing something that's morally wrong, but it's being not being able to maybe, would you say, interpret it in a way that is meaningful. Like it doesn't, maybe it is something that doesn't fit in your worldview, something that's not supposed to happen.
So would it be safe to say that it disrupts your worldview, or
yes,
shakes one's worldview?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Okay. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
And I was going to say there are potentially moral injurious events, right? And then there's moral injury itself, and those two are different. So what might be a moral injury event for someone else is not necessarily for someone else. For example, killing in combat is not necessarily a moral injury. Maybe somebody's trained for it, they're ready for it, they recognize, they think about this person as the other person is evil and so on. Maybe it was a difficult thing to do, but they're not overly troubled by it. They just felt like, hey, this is what you have to do. Another woman that was in our study, she talked about how she had to kill somebody in combat. She was a nurse, and that wasn't her job, but to survive, she had to do that. And she's still troubled by it now, decades later. She still thinks about that like every day. So there's potentially moral injurious events, and then there's moral injury when that particular event sort of disrupts your worldview, as you said, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, this whole, your statement that sexual trauma is common for women, and though not all women do experience it, I mean, that's
right.
In part not surprising, but it's frightening and shocking at the same time.
Right. Right.
I mean, how are women dealing with this? Are they dealing with it? What are you seeing on the front line, in a sense?
Yeah, well, it's. I asked each one of them about if what happened to them surprised them. Did they expect it? Because we kind of thought that with all the talk sort of out there in public about sexual assault in the military, that women might say be prepared for it. But none of them were. They all felt like, no, I never considered that would happen. I mean, this is the military. This is the most trusted organization in America, sort of thing. So the shock, is there, but also they really, really struggle with guilt to not believe that it's somehow their fault. Even though they know on one level it's not, they didn't ask for it. On another level, they have a hard time getting away from that. And then for some of them, they're never able really to have solid relationships again. They shut off inside. It breaks something inside of them. They become callous and hard, and it's very difficult for them to maintain a relationship because relationships require vulnerability, and they don't ever want to be vulnerable again. So there's a variety but for many of them, these sort of effects last their entire life unless they get therapy or help. And some of them get the therapy, some of them don't.
Well, that's what I was going to ask next. I mean, there's the common knowledge or thought out there that many I guess combat veterans who have experienced trauma oftentimes don't seek help, treatment. What are you finding with women in that situation?
Yeah, I think that I think for a lot of them it's true. They don't seek help, or partly what motivated me to get in this field is I had one that say I sought a chaplain's help, but since he did not seem to care, I never talked to another person again. And you're the first person I've told this story to since then. And that was years ago. And that, so for a lot of them, they just, they don't seek help. They they either don't feel they have support, or they feel like they can't tell anyone because of the shame and so on. I'm happy to say some of them are seeking help, have gotten therapy, they are getting better and so on. But it's definitely similar to men in the sense, maybe for different reasons, but they tend to not seek help. It's hard to get them to come to help, especially if you're talking somebody who hasn't been in the military. Seeking help from somebody who's not been in the military, who has not shared their experience, doesn't know the lingo, doesn't know the talk. It's that's a barrier, definitely.
So, in terms of how women are reporting what moral injury is to them, what are you finding? Have there been any commonalities or themes that you've been drawing out of the research or your experience?
Yeah. For many of them, when you say moral injury, they automatically think military sexual trauma, because it's so common. It's such a common incident. One woman said, it's not a matter of who, it's a matter of how much or to what extreme somebody has experienced military sexual trauma. So, and that was somebody who works with a lot of veterans. And so for them, they often define it in those terms, as being the result of military sexual trauma. Another common way that women experience experience moral injury or think about it is the abandonment piece. Just simply not having someone to go to, and not having somebody to turn to, feeling something is wrong, but not getting the support they needed to make a wrong right.
Right.
And then the third thing I would say that they define it, at least in terms of what it means in a concrete experience way, would be disrespect. Being an officer in the military, but not getting the respect of an officer, being treated like, a woman who doesn't belong there, kind of thing. So when I asked them to define moral injury, they tended to define it in terms of concrete experience rather than, maybe how I might define it as a researcher.
Do you offer, I guess, formal therapy to these? I mean, I guess is the chaplaincy that you offer them, is that therapeutic? I mean, of course it's therapeutic, but are you giving them quote unquote therapy? I mean, I realize that could be defined many different ways.
Yeah, right.
But I guess what I'm trying to get at here, are they more comfortable speaking with you as a chaplain as opposed to someone who is a psychologist or a therapist?
Yeah, it's very interesting. I think for a lot of them, simply being able to tell their story is therapeutic. And to a person, they have thanked me for including them in the research. And just getting to tell their story, and what they're also very sensitive to is, I hope this helps other women. I want this to help other women. And a lot of them are involved in support groups with other veterans. Now, there are times that at the end of the interview, I'll turn the audio recording off, and then we'll have another conversation about things that we discussed about their story, and it will become, a ministerial session. Like, I'll offer some pastoral support, if you will, if I feel like that's warranted. But most of the time, simply being able to tell their story, being able to share it, and have somebody really listen and really care, and feel like they're contributing to the well-being of other women, I think is enough, because they have a therapist or they have a counselor, or they're thinking about getting one. But I also always offer them to call me anytime. And that hasn't happened, but I do want to make it a ministry. It's not just a research project, but I do want to use it to help people if I can.
Well, it sounds, and maybe I'm mistaken here, but it sounds like this problem is huge. I mean, it sounds like it's just the tip of the iceberg. And and I know we can go on, but I just want to remind everyone that I'm speaking with Dr. Daniel Roberts. Daniel, before we close out here, how best can people get in contact with you? And I'll have this listed up at the show notes page at the traumatherapistpodcast.com.
Okay. You can email me at droberts@chaplainconsultants.com. Or my number is 910-690-5964. That's my cell. And so people can call me on that. Those are the two best ways to get a hold of me. My website is chaplainconsultants.com. And that provides a lot of information about what I do. And we also have a Women, Veterans, and Clergy Conference that we're putting together for next year. That will
women, veterans, and what is that specifically?
Yeah. So what that conference is about, it's about bringing together military chaplains, VA chaplains, civilian clergy, and women veterans to discuss moral injury, to talk about healing modalities, to talk about current research, and hopefully build a bridge, a connection between chaplains, clergy, and veterans, so that because military chaplains tend to do their business in the military, but I think we need to connect to civilian clergy so that when veterans leave the military, there's a handoff almost. But just to bridge all those relationships and put people together and learn how we can better help each other, how we can support each other, and how and to learn about moral injury, all that stuff.
When is that conference going to be?
We're putting together two right now. One is April 6th and 7th in Charleston, South Carolina. The other one is April 28th and 29th in Richmond. And we're hoping to create some other conferences, regionally oriented conferences, so that veterans don't have to travel far to come to them. But those are the two that we have in the works right now.
Awesome. All right, Daniel, how about a go-to book recommendation, whether, trauma related or not, or chaplaincy related or not, anything that's been kind of inspiring you lately?
Yeah. So the first one, I have a couple, but one of the books is called Counseling Women, a Narrative Pastoral Approach. And what that book is about, it's by Christy Nuger. And it provides a great framework for providing pastoral support from a feminist perspective. And it uses a narrative counseling approach, which is about helping women see the societal, familial, or personal narratives that maybe have been disabling them, and helps them create a new story for themselves. And so, again, that's Counseling Women, a Narrative Pastoral Approach. Excellent book for anybody, any chaplain or clergy who works with women. And then the second book, if I could, is a book called Women in Religion by Magella Franzman. And the interesting thing about this book, it's an older book, but it helps men see that women do not always experience religion the same way men do. And so some theologies, some ideas are actually disempowering to women. So helping them understand, helping men like myself understand how women might react to certain religious narratives or how they might see God in a different way, helps me as I work with them.
Awesome. We'll have both of those linked up at the show notes page, again, at the traumatherapistpodcast.com. Daniel, I want to thank you, man, so much for coming back. I would love to have you back. We can focus on spirituality. Fascinating, and it's inspiring what you're doing, man. It's awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it. It's been great being on your show.
All right, man. Take care.
Yep. You too. Bye.
The Foundation for Human Enrichment, DBA Somatic Experiencing Trauma Institute, is a 501c3 nonprofit dedicated to resolving trauma worldwide by providing professional training and education in somatic experiencing. It was founded by Dr. Peter Levine, author of Waking the Tiger, who develops somatic experiencing based on explorations of how animals deal with threat and traumatic experiences on a daily basis. Learn more about somatic experiencing and the SE professional training at www.traumahealing.org. That's www.traumahealing.org. All right, guys, I just want to say that I am thrilled to have this podcast sponsored by cptsdfoundation.org. A little while ago, I actually got to meet the founder, Athena Moberg of CPTSD Foundation. We met here in San Francisco, sat down, had breakfast, and it was amazing. I got to feel and see her passion, the passion that she has for this work, and not just for therapists and clinicians, but survivors as well. CPTSD Foundation provides peer-led support and adjunctive care in between therapy sessions for survivors of complex trauma. 7 days a week, 365 days a year, survivors can come together to give and receive support and validation and feel equipped with the knowledge and skills they can use every day. You can check it out at cptsdfoundation.org. Their website is amazing. They have daily recovery support. They have free support groups. They have a healing book club. And Trauma Therapist podcast listeners can get 50% off the first month when they join the daily recovery support calls. You can check that out by going to cptsdfoundation.org/trauma therapist podcast. Once again, that's cptsdfoundation.org/trauma therapist podcast. Or just head on over to the website at traumatherapistpodcast.com and click on the link there, and you'll be in business.